Hello! Welcome to another book talk video. And today we are discussing the book Finale by Stephanie Garber. So this is talking about the final book in the Caravel series, and I want to make sure it's clear that I like this book, because I feel like once I get talking about it, I'm gonna be like,
you didn't really like the book.
But I did! I promise you, I did like the book. Strangely enough, I'm gonna actually start from backwards on my notes and move forward. So in this book, Scarlett's and Tella's mother finally woke up. I honestly thought the author was gonna write her character in more, but instead what happened, her character came back to life only just to die. I wish the author would have wrote more into it when her mother would be like, shocking. Because the whole point of it was that the mother thought that the fallen star still loved her, and she thought if she could kill him then he'd be dead because he must still love her. As a reader, I guess the author might have been trying to be like, oh, why is this happening like this? Maybe the author wanted more confusion into it then to introduce the character Jax again, but I felt like the author could have gone so much in depth into this, and then when the mother dies, it's like, what? Like, cause you didn't really know the mother. Like, and that was the only death in this entire book. Have you noticed that? A book about wicked fates, and this is the only death we get. So what was the whole point with the Count? At first I thought the author was going to draw in like a huge storyline from this. The Count would betray them and he would go get their father, and then we kind of have a different dynamic going here. Like, we see different things at stake, because at this point all that was at stake is that the fates might control the world, which was bad. But honestly, I found myself getting into the whole idea with the fates only because you had Caravel and that had nothing to do with fates. You had Legendary and that kind of has something to do with the fates, like with the cards and stuff, but the fates weren't really unleashed until the very end of the book. And so now it's like these fates are here and it's like, nah, okay, cool. I mean, I still like the concept. Like, I think the fates still belonged in the world of Caravel because Caravel's very like magical and mystical, and like the fates were too, so it works that way. But if they would brought the father back as a bigger villain, I think it would have added more to the it's them against the world, because the father is technically a villain in the first book. I know the fates kind of take over and start to become the main villain. I don't know, I thought it could then like amp it up more, especially since we didn't really get any explanation to why the father is like he is. Or maybe it was, I just missed it, but I felt like there could have been more of an explanation why it was like that. I don't know, maybe he was just an awful man. That could be it. Also, the whole idea of Scarlett's mother and Tella's mother obviously being the lost heir, I felt like the author could have really ran with that, and it was just like, she could be. She could be not. We do not know. But I want to know. As a reader, I want to know. What's the whole point of building up this idea of a lost heir? We don't find out who the lost heir is. And I guess maybe it is, because I guess Scarlett's mother is not like gone into detail much, but then I guess it would be true because when Scarlett met her mother in that time travel back thing, is her mother said she didn't really have family. Well, that would kind of, I guess, relate to the lost heir. Also, the book never explained why Legend claimed the throne. Maybe I missed it, but I thought it was going to go more into detail why he did what he did, because I don't know, I felt like his character fell so flat in this book. Like, am I the only one who thought that? Like, I thought it fell flat because it was so like, yeah, nope, I'm not really the heir. People thought I was dead and I died. Okay, that's fine. That is fine. But never once did he go into say, this is why I claim the throne, even though, am I the lost heir? Am I not the lost heir? I don't know. I didn't really care for Legend's character. Like, the author does such a good job of building him up to be like really like fancy mystical creature, and not creature but person, and like mysterious, and we don't know who he is, and then it's like, well, here he is, and I don't even know what he was in this book. Like, all he was the whole time just telling Tella how much he loved her. Like, that was the extent of Legend, and I was like, well, and I don't fully believe when we find out Dante's legend. Like, I mean, it wasn't a huge shock. I kind of was able to guess it a little in Legendary, but I was like, okay. And I mean, a lot of that's just because I think you build up this character in your head, and then when you find out who it is, it's like, It's kind of like waiting for a book for a ridiculously long time, and then you read it and you're like, okay, that happened. But I don't know, and then I just never pictured Dante and Legend as the same person. Like, I don't know why, but whenever she talked about Dante and she was using the name Dante, I pictured one person. Then when she used the name Legend, I pictured another. I don't know why. Is it just me, or do you ever get halfway through books and you kind of like, how did I picture this character again? Or they also give you like this little detail and you're like, okay, that totally changes how I picture this character now. Does anybody else ever do that? Also, while we're on the topic of Legend, did Legend really even have a perspective? Like, the way the book made us out, it was gonna be like 3 perspectives: Tella, Scarlet, and Legend. Legend had a paragraph. That to me is not really a perspective. That's a paragraph. Especially when the book is actually written in third person to begin with, so it's kind of like, yeah, the events might be surrounding this one person, but it's in third person, so it's not like you're using I statements. So kind of going back on how Scarlet and Tella's mother was the only death in this book, no one dies, and like, don't get me wrong, I don't sit there wanting my characters to be miserable and for them to die. I don't. But the whole point of this was life and death at stake, and then they all lived happily ever after at the end. And I get it, because you wouldn't want Scarlet to die, you can't have Tella die, you can't have Legend or Julian die. Even though I thought if Legend died, it would be the perfect element to his story, because his whole thing was how he takes on the villain sometimes and how he sometimes becomes a villain. And I felt like it would be really, really good like character building if, you know, we see Legend kind of being selfish and stuff like that because he doesn't want to love Tella and all this other stuff, because he doesn't want to become immortal. And what really would solidify his character is if he became mortal because he allowed himself to love Tella, but then sacrificed himself, in that he might have found his redemption. Does that make sense? And I guess with life versus death idea, I guess if the fates took over, everyone would have died. I don't know, I just didn't feel like there was enough at stake. Like, you kind of predicted how the book was going to end. There wasn't like the, ooh, how is this going to end? And I think that's where a lot of young adult books fall short, is like they like to build it up, and you want happy endings. Don't get me wrong, you want happy endings, but it's kind of disappointing when you get to that ending and then it's like, and they lived happily ever after. And it's like, okay, like, love the happily ever after ending, but I want something at stake where I'm like gripping my book, praying to God that nothing happened. Instead it was like flat line. Oh, there might be a peak when we were in the ballroom, and then we go back down to a flat line. And I felt like that was the book. But one thing the author does really good is with the relationships of the book. You see a lot of times in books where the central love story is the main relationship with the book. And I really appreciate how the author kind of did that as a side thing, because not that I don't enjoy romances. Believe me, I enjoy romances. But this story was never about romance. The story was about 2 sisters and how they lean on each other to get through life's trials. And I think the author did a really good job finding that point, but also didn't exclude romantic relationships as well, because I find sometimes in books where authors go wrong, it's like they feel like they can't have a multitude of different things. They have to focus on one thing, and you can't have like side things or other things, you know what I'm saying? And I think the author did really well is she made her point clear on what she want, but that this book was about like sisterly love and friendship and relationship type way, but that didn't mean they were just solely focused on their friendship. It was they were focused, they had other relationships built, and I think that was really strong. Yeah, and Tella's character annoyed me in this book. I don't know, did anybody else find that? Like, Tella's character was painted so well in Caravan Ledger as like the strong female character who, you know, like was in relationships and didn't mind, but like she didn't need that relationship to define her. And then I felt like in this book it fell flat, because I felt like the whole book really, Tella did stuff. Like, Tella like was actually a strong female character, but I felt like also the whole book was like, do I love Legend? Do I not love Legend? Do I love Legend? Do I not love Legend? And that was it. And I wanted so much for there to be something like with Jax, because I don't know. Like, at first I thought the way the author was writing his character, it was gonna be more of like he was gonna redeem himself, and maybe it was gonna be a plot twist where she just goes with Jax. And I get it, like fates can't love, and like you don't want to change a character a complete opposite way just for a purpose of a story. But I thought there would be more in that than just he's obsessed with her, call it a day. Like, I thought it'd be more like he's fighting like internally, like, you know, because every book has the external internal fight. Maybe Jax could be internal, like he wants to love Tella but he can't, and I thought that would be it. Instead it was just like he secretly married them, he's obsessed with her, and I was just like, but this could be so much stronger. And then I just kind of felt like the ending was bleh. Like, you know, it just ended, and I was like, okay. Like, I saw a lot of people writing online how like, oh, it was too loose, like there wasn't really enough closure in it. I thought there was. Like, you kind of know Scarlet and Julian's gonna get married. Maybe you wanted to see that, but it's like, what does that really have to do with the book? Or it's like the whole thing with Legend, kind of, I don't know, the author left it kind of very open with that, like him and Tella. I don't know, I just felt this book was kind of flat, and I know the author was kind of very upfront about it. She said this book is gonna be very different from the next, but I think other books, like when you had Caraval as like kind of the main backdrop for, like you had it for obviously the book Caraval, and then Legendary, it had more excitement to it, where this was kind of just, like I said, good versus evil, and you kind of knew who was going to win at the end. And there wasn't the, ooh, kind of majesticness of Caraval with it. And something else the author did really well is writing from the dual perspectives. There's been a lot of books where I just could never get into dual perspectives because I've always favored one character over the other. But what made this book work was the fact we had one whole book written from Scarlett's perspective and the whole other book written from Tella's perspective. So you were able to get used to them as characters. So then when the dual perspective started, it was like, oh, okay, I get that. Because you look at some books, like for example, the Divergent series, we read from Trista's perspective the whole first two books, and then it goes to dual perspective in the third book, and it just lost me. Carnival was important in the book series, and I think sometimes, at times when reading the series, you're like, well, what did the first book have to do with any of this? Is I think because, yes, the second book set up Tella's character wonderfully for the third book, that first book is what really set up Scarlett's character. It's really what transformed her into the person she needed to be in finale, and I thought that was like really nicely done. But I kind of felt like the book favored Tella's perspective a little bit more than Scarlett's. Like, it wasn't like very equal. I'm like, okay, so was the series always supposed to be about Tella instead? Because Tella was probably dominant, and then you had some of Scarlett's, and then Julian was kind of just there. He was just there. Let's be honest with ourselves. He was there. I think this book series was always supposed to be about Tella and not Scarlett, and I think that's kind of interesting how the author kind of flipped that around. I definitely don't think there should be another book. I think the author did wonderful wrapping up the story, but I wouldn't mind like a short story, because the whole thing when Tella was visiting those sisters at that like market area, was it? No, not Shadow Market. That's Cassandra Clare. But at this market thing, the hidden market was? I don't know. It said how like, oh, your daughter will have one fatal flaw and you need to reveal that to us or else you will die. And it kind of really set up this da da da, but I want to kind of see how this can play out, because it's not really a risk in a book if you don't ever know how it's gonna play out. Like, yes, it was a risk to Tella, but as a reader it was like, okay, sure, this imaginary daughter we know nothing of, that we'll never read of, go for it. And I kind of hoping there might be a short story explaining that, so then it's like, so here's what was at stake. Like, I honestly thought that was gonna be the epilogue. Like, there really was no epilogue, let's be honest. I thought that would kind of be like the final closing thing. Like, here is what the choices we made, how they affect our future. Because Tella kind of did the exact same thing her mother did. So we kind of found this out during the whole Scarlett and her mother encounter or back through time. I was wondering, did the whole events that happened in history and in these books because Scarlett went back in time? And sure enough, that is the case. Like, if Scarlett didn't go back in time to warn her mother, then we might have had a whole different series, and I think that's kind of interesting how the author wrote that. Anyways, that was my review. Thank you so much for watching. Please write in the comments below what you thought, what you hope maybe the author would write another book, and what do you think it'd be about. Like this video, subscribe for more bookish conversations. Thank you, bye!